August 31st, 1943. Over the Solomon Islands. The dawn sky burns orange over the restless Pacific. Below, the sea glints like a sheet of molten steel, scattered with the wakes of warships and the dark stains of oil slicks. Inside a brand-new Grumman F6F Hellcat, Ensign Walter "Red" Owens tightens his grip on the control stick. The air hums around him, the raw vibration of a 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engine shaking his ribs. "Easy on the throttle, Red," his wingman's voice crackles through the radio. "She's still a heavy girl." Red smiles faintly inside his oxygen mask. "Heavy girl. That's what everyone's calling the Hellcat." The rumor spread from the decks of the USS Essex to every ready room in the South Pacific. Too bulky, too slow, too late. Japanese pilots laughed over it, calling it the Grumman Turtle. Against the legendary Mitsubishi A6M0, light, agile, and deadly, it seemed an unlikely hero. But the laughter would not last long. The Hellcats climbed through broken clouds, their dark blue wings slicing through mist. Below, the radio chatter grows urgent. Radar contact. A flight of Zeros inbound, 20 miles north, heading straight toward the American task force. Hellcat Squadron, Vector 15, Angels 20, let's intercept. The command cuts through static. Throttles forward. The engines roar in unison. Red's canopy rattles as the Hellcat leaps ahead, clawing into the sky. Moments later, silver dots emerge against the sun. Zeros, 10, maybe 12, descending in a tight spiral. Red's heart hammers. The briefing said to never try to outturn them, but the Hellcat had something new to offer: speed, armor, and firepower that could turn an ambush into a slaughter. The first pass happens in seconds. Machine guns roar. The sky blooms with streaks of tracer fire. Red pulls hard to port, the heavy frame groaning but holding steady. A Zero flashes across his nose, too fast, then another dives from above. He rolls, pulling the trigger. 650 caliber Browning guns light up the morning. The Zero bursts into flame. "Splash one!" he yells. Below, the second Hellcat squadron joins the fray, their dark shapes plunging from the sun. The battle becomes chaos, a tornado of contrails and smoke. Yet, unlike the fragile Wildcats before them, these new fighters don't shatter when hit. The armor plating shrugs off glancing rounds. The self-sealing fuel tanks hold. Pilots survive hits that would have killed them 6 months earlier. By noon, the sea below is dotted with fire. 7 Zeros down. 1 Hellcat lost. When they return to the Essex, the deck crew greets them with silent stares, then cheers. Red Owens climbs down from his cockpit, face streaked with sweat and oil. The chief mechanic pats the wing. "Not bad for a fat bird," he mutters. The myth of the sluggish Hellcat has just been buried somewhere in the Solomon sky. But back in Tokyo, no one believes the reports. The Imperial Navy still trusts in its aces, the men who once ruled the Pacific. And even as the Allies close in, Japanese engineers insist the Zero's spirit will never be broken. They haven't met the Hellcat at full strength yet. Bethpage, Long Island, February 1942. Snowflakes drift across the Grumman Aircraft Engineering Corporation's factory roofs. Inside, the smell of oil, metal, and ambition fills the air. Rows of engineers in grease-stained overalls hunch over blueprints under fluorescent lights. America has just been dragged into the war, and the Pacific has turned into a graveyard of American pilots. The Japanese Zero dominates every sky from the Coral Sea to Midway. Its pilots, veterans of China and the Pacific campaigns, seem untouchable. The Wildcat, the Navy's mainstay fighter, is valiant but outclassed. It climbs slower, turns wider, and bleeds energy in every dogfight. For every Japanese aircraft destroyed, the U.S. Navy loses 4 men. Something radical must change. At the far end of the assembly hangar, a man named Leroy Grumman, a short, wiry engineer with perpetually ink-stained fingers, leans over a fresh design sketch. The drawing shows a broad-winged fighter, thick in the fuselage, almost inelegant, but sturdy. He believes beauty in war is overrated. Survival is what wins battles. Make it tough, he says to his team. Make it something a farm boy can fly, fight, and walk away from if it gets hit. The prototype is dubbed XF6F1, designed around the Wright R2600 engine. But soon, Grumman receives word from the front, the Zero's climb rate and power outmatch even that. So he gambles everything. He tears apart the prototype and demands a bigger engine. The new Pratt & Whitney R2800 Double Wasp, a 2,000 horsepower monster. It's risky. The Double Wasp is massive, heavier than the airframe was meant to bear. But Grumman's engineers redesign everything. Wings strengthened, landing gear reinforced, fuselage lengthened. Within weeks, the Hellcat begins to take shape, its wide stance and high cockpit visibility, making it look more like a brawler than a dancer. By June 1942, the first Hellcat roars down the runway at Bethpage. Test pilot Robert Hall lifts it into the frigid sky. The aircraft trembles with raw strength. At 20,000 feet, Hall levels out and radios back. She climbs like a devil, controls are steady, and she feels like she wants to fight. That line becomes a quiet legend at Grumman. But before the Navy orders mass production, they need proof, and the perfect chance arrives that summer at Midway. American intelligence has recovered fragments of a downed Zero on Okinawa Island. Engineers crawl over the wreck for weeks, measuring every rib, every rivet, every panel. They discover its secret, brilliance and fragility. The Zero is built like glass, light, nimble, but fragile as a dragonfly. One burst of heavy fire could shatter it. So Grumman's philosophy hardens. If the Zero dances, the Hellcat will crush. By late 1942, the first production F6-3 rolls off the line. Over 12,000 will follow. The Navy's young pilots, some barely 20, train hard in the Hellcat's cockpit. They learn new tactics, boom and zoom, slashing passes from altitude, hit and climb strikes that use speed instead of maneuvering. Instructors tell them, don't turn with the Zero, dive, hit, climb, make him chase you, and he'll die trying. The Pacific skies are about to change. September 1st, 1943, near Marcus Island, North Pacific. The sea is a restless gray beneath the early morning clouds. From the carrier decks of the USS Yorktown, CV-10, the air smells of salt, fuel, and adrenaline. Pilots in leather jackets and life vests climb into their new machines. Grumman F6F Hellcats gleaming in deep navy blue, their fuselages freshly stenciled with white stars. Among them is Lieutenant J.G. Alex Vracchio, a young man with calm eyes and a sharp grit. It's his first real combat sortie in the Hellcat. The carrier's loudspeakers crackle. Pilots, man your planes. This is not a drill. Target, Marcus Island. Enemy air intercept expected. Engines thunder across the deck. Propellers blur into silver halos. As the first Hellcat lurches forward, deck crews duck under the blast wash. One after another, the fighters launch into the wind, banking into formation. The sea falls away below, and the pilots climb toward a sky that will soon be filled with fire. At 10,000 feet, the first contacts appear, Japanese Zeros, streaking in from the east like a swarm of silver wasps. The Americans tighten formation. The radio fills with clipped voices. And it's 12 o'clock high. Keep your altitude. Don't turn. Make them come to us. The Zeros dive fast, graceful, deadly. Their pilots, veterans from Naval and the Solomons, have no respect for these heavy slab-winged newcomers. One Japanese ace rolls inverted and dives, cutting between two Hellcats in a flash of white smoke. He squeezes the trigger. Tracers zip past Vracchio's canopy. Vracchio pushes the throttle forward and yanks the stick. The Hellcat surges upward, climbing effortlessly through the burst. The Zero tries to follow, but it stalls, wings trembling. That's the trap. Vracchio rolls over and dives. The Hellcat's 6.50 caliber Brownings blaze. A single burst tears through the Zero's fuselage. It explodes in a brilliant orange fireball. Splash! 1. Vracchio shouts, voice cracking through static. Minutes later, the sky becomes a storm of intersecting trails. The Hellcats hold their ground. Their thick armor absorbs punishment that would have shredded a wildcat or corsair. One pilot limps home with half his elevator gone, and still lands safely. Another takes 2 rounds through the wing and keeps flying. The Japanese pilots can't believe it. The Americans no longer flee or flounder in turns. They fight with speed and strength. By the time the last Hellcat returns to the Yorktown, the air is calm again, broken only by the hiss of the sea. 15 Zeros are gone. The Americans lost 1 aircraft, and the pilot is already fished from the water, alive. In the ready room, the young pilots slump into chairs, sweat-drenched and trembling with adrenaline. WWII grins as his squadron leader reads the kill tally aloud. "Gentlemen," he says, tapping the chalkboard, "that's what I call a proper introduction. The Hellcat's baptism by fire has been a triumph." Word spreads across the fleet. Pilots begin to trust the Iron Cat. The old joke about it being too heavy dies quietly, replaced by respect and fear among those who face it. From the Gilberts to the Marshalls, the Hellcat's shadow begins to stretch across the Pacific. And in Tokyo, reports arrive, disturbing ones. Commanders speak of American fighters that climb faster, dive steeper, and take more damage than the Zero could ever endure. At the Naval Air Technical Arsenal in Yokosuka, engineers study combat reports with disbelief. "Impossible," one mutters. "No machine that heavy could outfight a Zero." But the proof keeps coming. Wreckage washing ashore on Japanese-held islands, riddled with 50 caliber holes. The Empire's invincible sky hunters have finally met their predator. February 16, 1944, over Truk Lagoon, Caroline Islands, Tishitake. The sky above Truk burns red before dawn. The U.S. Navy's Task Force 58, a floating city of aircraft carriers, cruisers, and destroyers, surges through calm seas under radio silence. Below deck, hundreds of pilots wait in the dim glow of red lamps, flight helmets on their knees, coffee cooling in tin mugs. The operation's name is Hailstone, a 2-day strike designed to cripple Japan's Gibraltar of the Pacific. Lieutenant Commander David McCampbell, future top ace of the Navy, walks the flight line aboard the USS Essex. Around him, Hellcats sit in tight rows, their wings folded like resting eagles. He runs a gloved hand along the fuselage of 32, his own aircraft. "Let's see what you can really do," he murmurs. When the launch signal comes, it's like the gates of hell opening. Engines thunder to life, deck crews scramble, and propeller blasts whip the ocean spray into white mist. The first Hellcat roars off the deck and climbs into the twilight, followed by a rising swarm, blue silhouettes against an orange sky. Below them, Truk Lagoon glimmers, packed with anchored Japanese ships, freighters, cruisers, submarines, all unaware of the storm bearing down. At 7:45, the Hellcats dive through cloud cover, and the radio erupts. "Bandits! Multiple bogies, northwest quadrant." Zeros, dozens of them, scramble to meet the intruders. They spiral upward in elegant, desperate defense, their silver wings catching sunlight like knives. But the Americans have the height, the numbers, and the element of surprise. McCampbell's voice cuts in, calm, but cold. "All divisions, execute slashing attack, no dogfights, hit them hard and climb." The first wave of Hellcats streaks down at over 400 mph. Their 6 Brownings spit lines of fire through the morning haze. Explosions bloom across the lagoon. Japanese anti-aircraft bursts pepper the sky, but the F6Fs dive, strike, and pull up like steel hawks. Lieutenant Alex WWII, now a rising ace, locks onto a Zero chasing a dauntless bomber. He flips the safety, squeezes the trigger, and in 2 seconds, the Zero disintegrates in mid-air. Another turns to engage him, but the Hellcat's superior roll rate and dive speed turn the tables. WWII loops behind, firing short, controlled bursts. A second explosion. 2 kills in under a minute. The air becomes chaos, a theater of smoke trails and flaming wreckage. But the result is no longer in question. The Zeros can't match the Hellcats in climb, dive, or durability. Their once mighty fleet is trapped and burning below. By sunset, over 250 Japanese aircraft are destroyed in the air and on the ground. 40 warships are crippled or sunk. American losses: 12 planes. For the first time since Pearl Harbor, the Imperial Navy's air arm is shattered beyond repair. That evening aboard the Essex, The flight deck glows under work lights. Pilots gather around a makeshift scoreboard, names, tallies, and chalk-drawn kill markings. The mood is quiet triumph. McCampbell studies the figures, then simply says, "Gentlemen, the Pacific just turned our way." In Tokyo, the blow lands like a hammer. Admiral Manichi Koga, successor to Yamamoto, receives the reports in disbelief. Airfields gone. Pilots gone. The once invincible carriers now blind without trained air crews. Japan's engineers rush to develop replacements, heavier fighters like the A6N50 and the new Kawanishi Nonic J Shiden. But it's too late. The Hellcat has changed the game. Its combination of firepower, protection, and climb rate has tipped the scales irreversibly. Where once the Zero hunted freely, now its pilots fly with dread. Veterans tell rookies, if you see a Hellcat, dive for the sea, or you won't see home again. The balance of the Pacific skies has shifted. The hunter has become the hunted. But this is only the beginning of the Hellcat's reign. The Marianas, the Philippines, Okinawa. Each new battle will cement its legend further. And in one of those battles, the F6F will carve its name into history with a record that no other aircraft will ever match. June 19th, 1944. The Philippine Sea.I. The ocean is impossibly blue, stretching to the horizon in all directions. Beneath the midday sun, the air shimmers with heat rising from the carrier decks of Task Force 58. 15 American carriers packed with hundreds of F6F Hellcats, Avengers, and Dauntless bombers. It is the largest carrier force ever assembled in history. Below deck, pilots gather in briefing rooms, the hum of the ship vibrating through the metal walls. The maps show the Marianas Islands, Saipan, Tinian, and Guam, key stepping stones to Japan itself. The Imperial Navy, desperate to halt the American advance, has sent everything it has left: 9 carriers, over 400 aircraft, and dozens of veteran pilots. The Americans know they're coming. Radar picks them up, 200 miles west. Lieutenant Commander David McCampbell stands before his men, flight helmet under one arm, eyes sharp. "Tate. Gentlemen," he says quietly, "today we take the Pacific." The order comes moments later. "Hellcats, launch, launch. All squadrons intercept incoming bogies." The decks explode into motion. Engines roar to life. Propeller wash whips the sea into foam. One by one, the Hellcats are hurled into the sky, climbing in tight spirals toward the oncoming storm. At 18,000 feet, the first radar contacts appear. Hundreds of dots, moving fast. The Japanese are coming in waves. Zeros, Jills, Judies, all hurtling eastward from the fleet of Admiral Jizaburo Ozawa. The radio crackles with calm American voices. "Okay, boys, let's go hunting." The Hellcats dive. From the sun, from the clouds, from every angle, the blue-painted fighters slash into the formation like steel falcons. Tracer fire streaks across the sky. Explosions bloom in the thin air, smoke trails twisting like black ribbons. The Japanese pilots, many barely trained, are caught in the crossfire. Their formations dissolve almost instantly. Within minutes, it becomes a massacre. Hellcat after Hellcat tears through the enemy ranks. Pilots like Alex Rakiu record incredible feats, 6 kills in a single mission. His guns jam halfway through, but by then 6 Zeros are burning below, the smoke drifting across the endless blue sea. "It was like a turkey shoot," one pilot mutters later, and the name sticks. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. By sunset, more than 350 Japanese aircraft are destroyed. The Americans lose barely a dozen in air combat. On the carrier Lexington, Admiral Mark Mitcher watches the returning waves of Hellcats approach and mutters, "Boys, you just broke their back." That night, reports pour into Tokyo, entire squadrons annihilated. The Imperial Navy's finest airmen, gone. Japan can still build planes, but it can no longer build pilots. Training now takes weeks instead of years. The Zero, once the terror of the Pacific, is outmatched and outnumbered. Meanwhile, McCampbell sits in his ready room, exhaustion etched across his face. He's scored 5 kills today, but his eyes show no triumph, only understanding. The war is turning, but the killing has just begun. He writes in his logbook, "The Hellcat has proven herself beyond question. She's not pretty, but she's death with wings." In the weeks that follow, the Hellcats dominate every encounter: Saipan, Tinian, Guam. They patrol over the island chains like kings of the sky, bringing down whatever dares to rise against them. The numbers are staggering. By the end of 1944, the F6F Hellcat claims more than 4,000 enemy aircraft destroyed, with an average kill ratio approaching 19-1. But behind every number is a pilot: a 19-year-old from Kansas, a 23-year-old from Texas, a quiet mechanic turned ace from Ohio. The Hellcat has become more than a machine. It's a shield, a hammer, and a symbol of revenge for every pilot lost at Pearl Harbor, Midway, and the Coral Sea. Still, the war is not over. Ahead lie the Philippines, Leyte Gulf, and Okinawa, the final and bloodiest chapters of the Pacific Air War. And through them all, the Hellcat will keep flying, carving its legend into the burning skies of the Pacific. October 24th, 1944. Leyte Gulf, the Philippines. The dawn sky is heavy with haze and gunpowder. Below, the largest naval battle in human history is about to erupt. Across the vast waters of the Philippines, 4 Japanese fleets converge in a desperate bid to crush the American landing at Leyte. But before steel meets steel, the battle for air superiority begins, and the Hellcats are first into the fire. From the decks of the USS Essex, USS Enterprise, and USS Lexington, hundreds of F6F Hellcats roar to life. Their engines thunder in unison, echoing across the waves. Above the noise, flight leaders bark out final orders. Protect the bombers. Sweep the skies. Anything with a red circle, take it down. At 700 hours, the first Hellcat squadrons rise through a sheet of mist. The sea fades below, replaced by the jagged coastlines of Leyte and Samar. The radio crackles with warnings: Japanese aircraft inbound, multiple formations. Lieutenant Commander David McCampbell, now one of the Navy's most decorated aces, leads Air Group 15 off the Essex. Beside him flies Ensign Roy Rushing, his young wingman. The two climb to 30,000 feet, and then they see them. A wall of enemy planes. More than 60 aircraft, Zeros, Judys, and Betty bombers, glinting silver in the morning sun. "There's our dance, Roy," McCampbell says quietly. "Let's clean it up." The Hellcats roll into a dive. McCampbell's guns ignite. A Zero disintegrates. Another bursts into flames. In the chaos, Rushing peels off and takes down a bomber trying to reach the fleet. The air becomes a maelstrom, twisting contrails, trace of fire, and burning debris raining down like meteors. McCampbell never breaks focus. He flies with surgical precision, climbing and diving, firing short, brutal bursts. By the time he's out of ammunition, 9 enemy planes have fallen to his guns. One of the most extraordinary single sorties in naval history. Below, the Japanese fleets suffer catastrophic losses. Kamikazes, the new, terrifying weapon of desperation, begin their attacks. Hellcat pilots intercept as many as they can, diving through fire and flak to stop them before they reach the ships. Yet, some still get through. The war has entered a darker phase. On the USS Franklin, smoke curls from a near-miss explosion as deck crews drag burning wreckage aside. A young pilot climbs from his scorched Hellcat, his face blackened, uniform torn. He turns to his squadron leader and mutters, "These planes don't quit, so I won't either." By the end of the Leyte campaign, the results are staggering. The Japanese lose more than 500 aircraft in 2 days. The Americans, fewer than 40. The sea itself is littered with the remnants of Japan's aerial might. The Hellcat, once mocked for its bulk and simplicity, now rules the Pacific with absolute authority. But behind the triumph, fatigue sets in. Many pilots have been in combat for over a year. They've seen comrades vanish into the sea, watched flaming aircraft spiral into oblivion. And still, the orders come. New target, Formosa. Then Okinawa. In Tokyo, the despair deepens. Admiral Toyoda Shimimu studies the loss reports in silence. The once proud air groups of the Imperial Navy, The elite men who trained for a decade to master the Zero are gone. Their replacements are boys, some with barely 20 hours of flight time. The war in the skies is no longer a contest. It's an execution. As winter descends on 1944, the Hellcat stands as both a miracle of engineering and a grim symbol of inevitability. It has become the instrument through which Japan's empire of the air is erased, one sortie at a time. And yet, there is still one campaign left, one that will test even the Hellcat's dominance against the fury of men who no longer fight to win, but to die. April 6, 1945. The skies over Okinawa. The island below is a cauldron of smoke and thunder. Artillery flashes from ridgelines, destroyers hammer the shore, and the sky itself seems to bleed fire. For the men of the U.S. Navy's carrier task groups, this is no longer just another battle. This is the doorway to Japan itself. And guarding that doorway are the Hellcats. From the decks of the USS Bunker Hill, USS Enterprise, and USS Intrepid, pilots strap in as the alarm klaxon wails. Incoming. Multiple bogies. Bearing 270, low and fast. This time, they're not facing a disciplined enemy formation. What comes over the horizon is chaos incarnate, the kamikaze. Dozens of aircraft, some obsolete trainers, some modified bombers, plunge through the clouds in wild, suicidal dives. Each carries a single, 500-pound bomb, and a pilot determined not to return. The Hellcats launch in minutes, throttles wide open, propellers screaming against the salt wind. The climb feels endless, the tension unbearable. As they break through the lower clouds, the sight freezes even veteran pilots, a sky swarming with hundreds of enemy planes diving toward the fleet. Lieutenant Bob Burnell pushes his Hellcat into a full-power dive, lining up his first target. The Japanese plane is wobbling, smoke trailing from its exhaust, but still flying straight toward an American destroyer below. Burnell fires. His tracers rip through the fuselage. The kamikaze explodes mid-air, but 5 more follow. The radio bursts with overlapping voices. He's heading for the Enterprise. Take him. I can't. He's too low. Watch your 6. Watch your 6. For 4 straight hours, the Hellcats battle wave after wave of kamikazes. Each time one is shot down, 2 more seem to appear. The air smells of burning oil and cordite. The sea boils with wreckage and fire. Pilots run out of ammunition and ram their enemies if they must. Lieutenant Don Gordon of VF9 records 4 kamikazes shot down in one mission. Another pilot, Ensign Franco Flaherty, is seen diving head-on into an enemy plane to stop it from striking the Bunker Hill. His sacrifice saves hundreds aboard. The Hellcat has become more than a machine. It's a shield between life and annihilation. By nightfall, the Americans count over 350 enemy aircraft, destroyed in a single day. Yet even with such success, some slip through. The Bunker Hill burns after 2 kamikazes slam into her flight deck. The Enterprise limps from battle, wounded but alive. For the men below deck, every siren, every engine sound in the distance brings the same question. Is it one of ours, or one of theirs? Okinawa becomes the most brutal test of the Hellcat's legacy. Between April and June 1945, its pilots destroy more than 1,000 enemy planes, but at a terrible cost. Dozens of American carriers and destroyers are damaged, thousands of sailors killed. The ocean, once the stage of triumph, now feels haunted. And yet, through exhaustion and grief, the pilots keep flying. Every sortie, every interception, pushes Japan's defense closer to collapse. The kamikaze threat, terrifying as it is, cannot halt the tide. By the time Okinawa falls, the Japanese Air Force is finished, not beaten tactically, but erased. The skies above the Pacific belong solely to the blue-winged Hellcats. When the atomic bombs fall on Hiroshima and Nagasaki months later, there are no Zeros left to rise in protest, no aces to meet the challenge. The age of the Hellcat ends not in glory but in silence, a silence it had fought, killed and bled to achieve. The Pacific skies are quiet. Too quiet. On August 15, 1945, Emperor Hirohito's voice crackles across the airwaves, announcing Japan's surrender. Aboard the USS Missouri weeks later, as peace is signed, a lone F6F Hellcat circles overhead, not in victory, but as witness. The war it was born for has ended. September 2nd, 1945. Tokyo Bay, Dartul. A pale morning light spreads across the still waters. Anchored in solemn silence, the USS Missouri rests at the heart of a massive Allied armada. Around her, warships from the United States, Britain, Australia, and New Zealand form an iron ring, not of battle, but of peace. Above them, the sound of engines breaks the stillness, a slow, echoing rumble that carries across the bay. 3 formations of aircraft sweep overhead, Corsairs, Avengers, and at the center, the Grumman F6F Hellcats, their wings flashing silver in the sun. They fly not to fight, but to bear witness. On deck below, General Douglas MacArthur stands before a small table draped in white. Japanese envoys bow deeply as they approach, their signatures trembling upon the surrender documents. The war that began in the skies over Pearl Harbor now ends under the wings of the very machines built to avenge it. For the Hellcat pilots watching from above, it is an ending both proud and hollow. Many remember their first missions, the fear, the fire, the weight of survival. Now there is only quiet and the faint scent of oil and salt in the air. In the months following Japan's surrender, the numbers are tallied, analyzed, and finally published. What they reveal is staggering. Across 2 years of combat, the Grumman F6F Hellcat achieves 5,163 confirmed enemy kills. No other Allied fighter, not the Mustang, not the Spitfire, comes close in total air victories in the Pacific. Its kill-to-loss ratio stands at nearly 19-1. 19-1. Behind that figure lies not arrogance, but design, and the countless choices made by men who refused to build something elegant when something indestructible was needed. The Hellcat was not the fastest aircraft of the war. It did not have the sleek grace of the Zero or the polished lines of the Mustang, but it was forgiving, tough, and brutally efficient. It was a machine made for ordinary pilots to do extraordinary things. As veterans return home, the stories begin to spread. Of fights over Truck Lagoon, the turkey shoot above the Marianas, the endless duels in the grey skies of Okinawa. Each tale carries the same theme. The Hellcat brought me home. At Grumman's factory in Bethpage, Long Island, the workers who built her gather for a quiet ceremony. A single F6F Hellcat sits gleaming on the runway, wings folded, its paint scuffed and faded from the war. Someone has chalked the words, "The Ace Maker," on its cowling. Leroy Grumman, older now, speaks only briefly. "We didn't build a fighter. We built a promise that if our boys went up, they'd come back down." The Hellcat becomes the most successful naval fighter ever produced. Its rugged airframe will serve into the 1950s, training a new generation of aviators in the early jet age. Yet nothing quite matches its legacy. The aircraft that rose from ridicule to dominance, from too heavy to fight to the undisputed ruler of the Pacific. 1946. Nas Alameda, California. Rows of Hellcats sit idle, lined wingtip to wingtip under the bright sun. Their propellers are still, their engines silent. Many will be scrapped. A few will find homes in museums or training units. But for those who once flew them, they are not relics. They are ghosts of comrades, of youth, of fire and courage suspended in time. As one pilot walks along the line, his hand brushing the cool metal of a retired F6F, he whispers to no one in particular, "You were mocked once, but you ruled the sky." The Pacific wind answers softly, sweeping across the empty field, carrying with it the memory of roaring engines, trace of smoke, and the echo of victory.